Okay, let us move on to our next speaker, who is Gerardo Bracho, who is Deputy Director General in the Mexican Agency for International Development Cooperation. Gerardo has been working on development cooperation issues for a long time as Mexican delegate to the DAC, because Mexico is an observer in the DAC, and representing the countries which are both donors and recipients. So I quite like, I've now forgotten what the phrase which Andrew used instead of that. It was
transmitters and receivers.
Transmitters and receivers. I'm going to take that one on. So both transmitters and receivers in the Busan negotiations, the negotiations for the outcome document in 2011, and also spent a lot of last year as one of Mexico's delegates to the G20. So I think he has a lot of different perspectives to bring us on these issues. Gerardo.
Hello. Yeah. Well, thanks for inviting me. I must say that I received lots of questions, and then in the end they gave me only 10 minutes, so I will have so I will just try to tackle very few of them and try to see in the discussion. So I'll start with can I have I'll start very briefly with a very brief overview of our development system, and then I will talk about our position on Busan, on the Busan agenda. I will just challenge basically those two questions. Well, firstly, as Matthew was saying, and as you know, we are a dual, one of these strange new concepts, the dual country. We have always been a recipient country, but a marginally recipient country. We never received much aid. And we have also been provider of South-South cooperation for many decades. And now, of course, our profile is to become more like a donor, or a more serious provider of South-South cooperation. Of course, as you can see in the first slide, our cooperation is very much concentrated in Latin America. Especially in Central America and the Caribbean. We're starting having very small projects in Africa. We are having some starting also on the agenda of triangular cooperation, basically with Spain, Germany, and with Japan, of course. And we are also having some kind of triangular cooperation with Chile, which is something new, the South-South-South, helping IT. The next. Now, this is very familiar also for all southern cooperators as at the Mexico level. We have very few loans, very few grants. When you talk about development cooperation in Mexico, usually you think about technical cooperation. That comes from the Buenos Aires Action Plan in 1978. All our view of cooperation is basically that: knowledge sharing, technical cooperation, scholarships. That's the basic thing we do. We are starting to do some more financial, more complicated cooperation, basically following a bit the Chinese model, I would say. We are making now in Central America some grants together with loans, helping, for example, create infrastructure in Honduras. But this is something very new. And of course, then we have the humanitarian aid, which is something also very easy to sell in Mexico, and we are very good at this, and quite generous, for example, in the case of IT. Now, well, before I would just end this bit of my presentation, mentioning the few institutional progress that we have done in the last years. We adopted in April the last year. We adopted a law of development cooperation that we didn't have. And that actually, I think this is very important. For example, we had an agency before, but it was suddenly a foreign minister came, didn't see wanted to do other things. He needed money, and he shut it up. He shut it down. That was in 2000. And the thing is that we didn't have a law, so it was very easy just to get rid of this institution. And well, this is just anecdotal to see, to just give you a flavor of the importance of really grounding in law this type of institutions. We have a law now, and then we have, thanks to this law, we have a new cooperation agency that was just created last year. But well, which is our challenges here? Our challenges is, I would say, we have basically two. One is that we haven't so far, even if we are a G20 country, even if we are members of the OECD, a big economy, I don't think the 11th or 12th in the world. It's strange, but we haven't, this government and previous government haven't really taken the political decision to strengthen Mexico's profile as a cooperation provider, as a donor. And why? And I come back to Brenda's question on the other session, because it's a big communication problem for us. People still see Mexico as a developing country, as a country with many poor people, and just the idea of selling ourselves as a donor is really complicated in terms of communication. Just to give you a flavor of how complicated it can be, a few months ago, our finance minister at some point declared in the press and said, well, you know, we are a middle-income country already, and I mean G20, and I don't remember well the context, but the point was that he was hounded down because people, I mean the press and the political establishment thought that he was meaning that we didn't have poverty anymore in Mexico, and that he was forgetting that 50% of the population was still poor, etc., which of course was crazy, because of course we are a middle-income country. I mean, since the 60s. So, but still, he got this very bad press. Just to give you a flavor of the difficulties of a country like ours to take this kind of political decision. And the other challenge that we face, I think, is to really bring the private sector in. We have an enormously rich private sector. We have the richest man in the world, and these people are very little involved in our as philanthropists in our own country, and much less abroad. So, but for example, in IT. Where we were helping IT with this catastrophe 2 years ago, we managed to bring the private sector for the first time. So this is another big challenge. I was asked also to talk about the difference between our system and what are the traditional donors. And well, Matthew already said some of the things that we hear all the time, and I think many of them are true. Of course, our scale is much smaller than the traditional donors. The type of cooperation, as I said, is much humanitarian and technical cooperation, less grants and loans. We have no conditionalities. It's really demand-driven. This is not a slogan. It's really true. Basically, we get together with these mixed commissions at an official level with, for example, representatives of Guatemala and representatives of Mexico. And the Guatemalan people start asking us what they would want of Mexico, and we provide that. It's basically, that's how we operate. That doesn't mean that we don't publicize the things that we can do. For example, we just published something called the Catálogo de Capacidades of that. I mean, the things that Mexico can provide in terms of technical capacity to other countries. Then, of course, the little aid we do in financial terms is obviously tied to Mexican companies, and I think it will be tied for a long time. I must admit that. And then the question of the impact that Matthew was bringing up. I mean, to say the truth is something. The question of evaluation and assessment is something we're just really getting at. So we don't really know very much, except the basic output. That, I mean, if you put some money or something for a school, and the school is done. I mean, that's basically as much as we do. And we know this is an agenda we have to work on a lot. Then I will just, if time allows, very quickly tackle another question that I was asked, and that's the position of Mexico in the international arena on the development agenda. And here you can see we are very active here. We were presidents of the G20 last year. We are very active also in the post-2015 MDGs question. We were very active on the climate change discussions, and of course also in the Busan partnership. And I will just finish my intervention telling you a bit of our position on this last fora, which is Busan. Well, as Matthew was saying, we are observers in the DAC, which gives us a particular position in the world, because we are at the same time South-South providers, but also members of the OECD and observers of the DAC. That gives us, I think, a particular perspective on many international issues, and especially on the Busan question. When we saw what was the aid effectiveness agenda back in 2005 with the Paris Declaration, well, our first reaction was, where are we represented here? Because you could read the Paris Declaration, and there were only two categories of bilateral actors, official actors, recipients and donors. And of course, we are very marginal recipients, and we tend to be more like donors, but we are not traditional donors either. So we really thought that there was a gap that was not capturing our interests, our country, and others as well. So basically, our position was to, within the DAC, be something like an informal representative of the South-South providers, and trying to create this conceptual concept and some ideology and some ideas on how to bring these new actors into the agenda. And I think we contributed quite much to do this in the end. Because if you see in the Paris Declaration, there was no mentioning of that. Then in Accra, at least there was a recognition of these new actors. In Accra also, Colombia joined very strongly into this agenda. And finally, in Busan, we managed to create some space. The point here is that really there was no concept, there was no idea of how to bring us together, because we didn't develop as other countries developed into going from recipient to donors, for example, as Korea or Spain in the past or Ireland in the past. We were a very strange animal here, because we were still developing countries, we were still having all this poverty at home, all these development challenges at home. But we were asked to play another new role, and I think it will take a long time for us to create this space. I could see it. I'm running out of time, but I could give you some anecdotes of how the lack of this conceptual world is hindering, for example, a good work in the development working group of the G20, for example. There's lots of confusion of what we are doing there to help other countries. We came in the Busan document with this idea of common principles but differentiated responsibilities, that I thought it was, we proposed that. And I think that it's a very good starting point to really create a space, a conceptual space for these new actors, because these new actors won't become traditional donors for many, many years to come. If you see it in per capita terms, they will still be developing countries for, I don't know, India, if you think. I mean, Mexico has a much higher per capita than India, but India will be a developing country for a long time. So just to flag that this is something that, I mean, a work in construction, and we are very much on this topic. Thank you.